I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Okay. Okay. That was very sportsmanlike. I think white is doing really well here. And instead of a loss, I probably would have lost this on time. My opponent kept the game true to the board. I think that black is going to have a hard time dealing with all the pressure. And there's also the weakness of the d7 square. It's not really the weakness of the square, but as a place to, I think, fork king and queen. And if not fork king and queen, then after the rook covers d7, the rook comes into d7. That's the exchange already, but also just hordes of major pieces knocking right on black's door. So we'll see. This type of situation will clarify by way of computer analysis. Let's see how the game ended here. With a mate in 7 for white, and my opponent chose to resign, and I feel honored by that. There's one way to be. There's one way to deal with this situation. All right. I said we are gonna play this out against computer, as black moves. Yeah, just black's gonna lose his queen if that's really the best move. Queen g5. We'll trust that for now. So even short of making it, well, no, the checkmate possibilities are still open. We find this check on the back rank. And now the question is, where and which rook should white obtain? Is there something to be... Put this check in and we lose the knight, which we're gonna lose anyway. So I'm thinking, you know, a move like queen g7 keeps the knight and then grabs the rook on c7. So that's gotta be white's best move here. We can check black's king away from defending the knight, but doesn't that cost us the rook? We can't pick up this rook now. We'll have to settle for losing the knight again, which may have been how it was anyway. Alright, well, this is now a challenge. Let's play this out all the way. Alright, so white does grab even more material, and without the sequence ending exactly in a forced checkmate, white will finish the game smoothly nonetheless. I think this does it, right? And if he captures the pawn, we make checkmate by moving queen to a2. if he shared it. All right. Now, one of the things I love after every game that you play, you can see like was the game accurate. This was a fun and strong game by both sides. One of the few, uh, you know, one of the few games that is not accurate. This is not an accurate game, but still, I felt like there was a lot of zest and oomph, chutzpah, and courage, energy, and thinking during this game. So I really value my opponent in that way. All right, so that was good. This is going to be a similar type of similar, about the same accuracy. It's the same game, but we add computer best moves and their responses. That if I make a mistake, I take it back, kind of thing. So between those two forces, that's going to make the game more accurate. So just a little bit more accurate, and we found a brilliancy in here. Yeah, that this was this was to create the capture of the queen. So rock on, way to go, guys! And I think it's probably a good time to play another game. Um, Look, I played through the game so inaccurately that I don't want to give inaccurate advice. So I'll play another game, and if it's a game I play accurately, it means it's a game I understood. And maybe I'll review that game at that point. Let's go. Let's play another game. Okay. The Philippines, Chile, 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 Chile. to this and just say, oh, okay. The obvious move is knight takes knight. Aha. I see white is... I think white can stabilize. It's complicated. Alright. Played poorly. My opponent was a strong chess player and mercifully resigned this game. I am gonna win this game, but it's still merciful resignation. Maybe not. I was gonna win the game. Let's review some of these games. Put all of these up for review, and let's make sure that the server is going on them. So good. Yeah, bishop d4 does lose the bishop. I thought it also put this fork on the map, and now I'm realizing that the pawn at c7 is covering b6 anyway. So we play pawn to c4, pawn to c3, and after bishop e4, we found the I found, yes I can say I found the fork on f4. So I suppose there was an even better move available with pawn to e7. But I found this fork was going to level the material, and rather than spend time deciding who was going to be at the end of the f4 pawn's blade, my opponent decided to try to kick my knight from d5 instead, moving knight to b6 check, and I'm going to grab the rook soon after. Let's play this out. I think this is a game that I probably could just about play out against Torch and still manage to claim victory. Now my gut would be to capture the bishop on e5, but pawn takes g5 doesn't look so bad either. There's this threat on the pawn, but the bishop will be there, so we're trying to make this pawn on e6 not necessarily promote, though that would be great, but this has to cost black something. This pawn has gone from e2 to e4 to e5, now to e6. He's contemplating e7, right? This pawn is worth it. Baby, I'm worth it. Bow, bow, bow. Baby, I'm worth it. Bow, bow, bow. If you're worth it, let me work it. That kind of stuff, but rook takes a yeah, I like capturing the knight and leaving this rook to sort of like leaving this bishop to sort of always be I don't know, defended by the d6 pawn, something like that. Now we grab another pawn, rook to f7 check. Grabs the h7 pawn. And like I said, we're going to make black, we'll make him pay. Now the idea here is either to keep the pawn on the light squares here, where black's e5 bishop can't factor into its attack, or push the pawn to e7, knowing that the h7 rook has its back there. I'm not so sure about pawn e7. We think like bishop f6, right? But then that opens up my other rook to double protect on e7. Captures. That would favor white, but so far so good on pushing the pawn. What other ideas could black use to try to stop white's passed pawn? I mean, just staying there keeps the e1 rook from protection. But that might give it. White might even have enough time to play rook to f1 and then rook to f8. The trades on f8 promote a pawn to queen. Under time pressure, I'll probably play rook to h6 here. But I think white has a bit better with pawn at e6 to e7. Pawn to e7 I think is fine. Nope, our computer overlords say no. And somehow bringing the king just in the nick of time probably settles things. So we'll keep that idea in mind as we now evaluate other options. For instance, protecting from the side, making a downward trade, exchanging, sacrificing the exchange. Not Jordan, bad Jordan, bad Jordan, bad Jordan. You know, this is better. We're better off not sacrificing the exchange here. I think rook to h6 is wise. And there's also, hey, it's a pawn. If it's a pawn, then so is this one on g5. Rook to h5, but then bishop to f6. I don't like that. I like rook to h6 here. So that's the best move. Now we can sort of link this idea of making sure that we get our pawn's worth out of this. We're not going to have much luck with our rook on the e file, right? What's the rook doing here except attacking a protected piece of lower or inferior value, right? So the rook on e might need to move. We also need to keep track of rook from h6 moving to g6, and that's maybe this could possibly be a threat that black has difficulty dealing with, except for I think there's always bishop to f4, and if pawn to g3, then bishop to d2. Maybe black's bishop is just barely escaping here. I like rook to f1. Then white comes in with a check. Rook to f7 check. I think white is now prepared to play pawn to e7. Yeah, and white has this now. White's going to abandon the e7 pawn, sadly. Rook to h3 is a mistake. So let's go back from that. Is it? Rook to h3. Well, we might play that, but activating the king. I see. Alright. So we'll activate the king here. Okay. Hey, alright, let's go back. There's a better general approach here. It's not exactly competing passers, but it'll do. Now it is. Okay. Yes, I can hear one of my teachers that in situations like here, one thing we must do is ignore the temptation to over push. Aha. White is going to ignore the temptation to over push here. Now this, not here, it's done, but sort of like around here when I, in my first attempt at just about this position, what I over pushed. So now I'm recalling the good advice of ignoring the temptation to over push. B7's fine. Come in here is good. There we have it. Don't ignore it completely. Know that there's a natural tendency for most chess players to over push. Better said as ignore the temptation to over push. Alright. So we found that the game itself plus the portion added the portion added against computer was quite accurate, so I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to get the win. I thought for a moment that this pawn had been here or here, and I could have had this fork earlier, and I was like, oh no, 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 I missed the fork. I'm gonna get, like blunder check marks, blunder marks against me on that. But it turns out my opponent didn't move that pawn until here, and I jumped on the opportunity right away. A little more opportunistic and a little bit better chess, so I feel good. Pat myself on the back. I am a person who needs a lot of comforting in my life. I don't know. Some people are like that, and some people aren't. Some people who are like that don't know it, and others do. I'm that last group. I need a lot of reinsurance, and I worry a lot, and it's always great to be comforted. So this was a comforting moment. Knight to b6 check. All is well in this particular chess game. All right. What else were we going to look in on some of these other games? I had mentioned maybe, if this game is as inaccurate as 44% against 59%, we'll maybe say, not so much for that game. And this game, let's see, this is a game ending with black checkmating on the last rank, and my opponent had black. I think that's gonna be this game. Just remind myself what happened. Yeah, okay, so I tried a few things here that didn't work. Look at this, though. Look at white's center. This is a very dominating center. There's air around white's king, and my hopes were that castling king side would make the white king safe anyway. A little bit of a battery on the queen side, and this was it. Here, I think white does very well after a5. I played h4, and I'm pretty sure the move here for white is a5. Yes, wow, feeling good. This is another type of move that I've been able to find more naturally after having played a lot of chess in the last 4 years. a5. Why a5 here? You might see. I mean, isn't it better to castle and have a safe king, or get these pawns started on a pawn rush in the nick of time? Those are good thoughts. Maybe develop the knight at b1 to d2 and have a great symbiotic protectorship and relationship between both of white's knights. They're all great thoughts, but remember, the point of a4 was so that this battery stays. The whole point of a4 was to keep this battery intact. I betrayed that point with the move. My opponent knows this, and he's looking to play knight to a5. Because after a4, the pawn can go from b7 to b5, and it's not effective for black. If the pawn's back here, then b7 to b5 is a real positional threat. So I played a4 so it can do that part, and then you gotta better your a pawn here, Jord, by playing the next move a5, and the knight can't attack the battery, the queen on b3, and the bishop on c4. The knight cannot attack the two of those because the rook suddenly covers the a5 square. It turns out to be about the rook. I'm all about the base, no treble. Well, I'm all about the rook, it's a barracks, and it's a rook, and it's a castle, and it's a base. So here he is on a1, protecting a5 when I make the correct move. Now, it's not like, I can't beat the computer off of this move, but very directly, the move here for white, right? It's white's turn. The move here for white is pawn to a5. And if I have things right, even with pawn to a5, the b7, b5 still isn't effective because of the en passant capture on b6 of the b5 pawn. Yeah, it's a this is a game of some maneuvering, finding weak spots, probing for weaknesses, and then I dropped the queen here on that rook, without any way to regain material, and checkmate is right around the corner, so it's Christmas, sort of, mid-October and all that. So I thought I thought this game was very, very well played by my opponent. 84% accuracy, good, and this was an extreme game. I'm gonna leave it up. I think we're pretty much done. Yeah, this game isn't accurate enough. It's like 17 moves long, if I recall. It's just, there's 17 moves long, and you know, White is getting crushed. So we close that one. This one really earned some respect for my opponent from me. Uh, he's Felipe, and he's playing chess out of Chile. If you don't know, Chile is very. Chile runs north to south, and it's narrow and very, very long, and very mountainous. The Andes Mountains are in and around Chile and Argentina, and pretty much form the border between Argentina and Chile. So was this one some kind of okay? Black has a good lead, and then this one was we went into detail about this one. All right, so I played well. My opponent played well. Great games, and all right, so I'm more gravity. No, thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.